Okay.
I'm David Ainsworth, Head of Communications for the United Nations Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity. We're here in Geneva on the 19th of March, a Saturday. So we are now officially 1/3 of the way through the Geneva meetings taking place here at the International Conference Center in Geneva. Delegates worked all the way from Monday through Friday and will continue to work today on these meetings. Let me remind your viewers that there are 3 consecutive meetings taking place. There's the meeting of the subsidiary body on science for the convention, known by the acronym SBSTTA or SUBSTA. There's the meeting of the implementation body for the convention, known as SBI. And then also there's the working group that's negotiating the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. So yesterday, the working group continued its work on targets, goals, milestones, etc. The contact group, which looked at goals and milestones, and they will probably have things to look at for Monday as well. They had a lot of interventions. There were 88 different interventions by parties, 1 by a non-party and 12 by stakeholders. What that means is that 88 different countries had something to say for the area. That's a lot, but the group is moving forward on it as well. I mentioned a number of days ago that there were differences of opinion on the extent to which there should be milestones in the target. Those differences of opinion continue, and that's one of the issues that will have to be addressed. What that means is, should the framework have interim milestones? Which means, should we be asking governments to implement or realize things in the midterm before the end of the decade? There are trade-offs, because on one hand, it actually is a way to encourage further progress, but on the other hand, it could be a rather strong reporting burden for a lot of countries. The working group doing the negotiation also had a contact group that looked at the targets again. So they're looking at the first 8 targets, and these targets relate to protecting the status of biodiversity. This is really about conservation and affecting the drivers of biodiversity loss. So they finished discussion of the first 3 targets of that area. They are hoping that they're going to soon discuss today the issues of the target relating to climate change and biodiversity and a target relating to pollution. So, just to remember, the target relating to climate change will be about ways that biodiversity can contribute to the mitigation of climate change, slowing it down, and also adaptation. The pollution target that's being discussed here is very interesting because it deals not just with pollution from, say, agricultural practices, but there's an element of plastic pollution there, which is a new element. So those will be discussed over today, and their hope is that they'll get through those and be able to have a paper moving forward. So the working group will do these, and then on Monday, when they meet again, they will have a stock-taking plenary where they'll review where they're at and figure out how they move forward. The scientific body also met yesterday, so that's the SBSTTA, the subsidiary body on science, technology, and technological assessment. So they did more work on the indicators. Now remember, the indicators are ways that we keep track of how we're moving forward in the targets. And the indicators have to be bits of data that will say, are we protecting species? Are we ensuring that ecosystems work? Are we moving forward on combating unsustainable consumption? So they looked at targets 15 and 19, or 219, pardon me, for those targets. There are new indicators proposed again, and so therefore, one of the issues is how do we add these new indicators at this late period of time? So they'll be looking at that again, but they won't do that till Monday, so we'll take a look. Again, remember, if you'd seen my other newscast, the system they're doing for evaluating that is a traffic light system, where parties evaluate if an indicator makes sense, they give it a green light. If the indicator needs more work, they give it a yellow light. And if the indicator just does not work, they give it a red light. And that's a way of coding and figuring out consensus building as well. This morning, the SUBSTA is going to meet in plenary, which means it'll be available and viewable on the web. What they're going to do is they're going to take a look at the work that they've already done on soil biodiversity and try to come to a conclusion on it. And then they're also going to look at their work on invasive alien species and see if that comes forward. Invasive alien species are the question of different species of vertebrates, invertebrates, etc., that have moved into ecosystems and how they can be controlled or managed. Invasive alien species really are a strong consequence of international trade, and so what are some of the ways we can manage that as well? They'll look at that, and then finally they'll also try to really finalize 2 more documents. One document, which is a review of the Global Biodiversity Outlook, which was published back in 2020, and then also a document on IPBES. Now, IPBES, if you remember, it's the intergovernmental platform on science for biodiversity and ecosystem services. This platform answers questions with a strong scientific basis given by the convention. So this paper will provide some guidance on what we would like IPBES to do next. The only other thing is to say tonight the delegates will be working on a Saturday evening here in Geneva, and they will continue their work on health and biodiversity with the hope that they can finish that moving forward. The subsidiary body and implementation is the last one that I have to mention for you today. So the contact group will meet tonight and they will discuss the gender plan of action. As I mentioned, all the work we do for biodiversity protection needs to take into account the special considerations of gender. Men and women have different roles with regard to the protection of biodiversity, and in some contexts, women's roles will be considerably different than men's. The gender plan of action makes sure that as we develop biodiversity policies, we're taking these gender differences into account, and also ensuring that both women and girls are full, active, and implicated participants in the whole process. That plan will be discussed this evening. Yesterday, they also discussed a draft communication strategy for the post-2020 biodiversity framework. There were a number of differences of opinion that will be addressed and looked at in a CRP. They also did work on capacity building last night in the contact group. They have a great deal of work to do. Capacity building is important because for many of the countries under the convention, addressing and being able to realize their goals requires, whether it's human resources, other capacity building. And so this is a plan to see how can we move forward in that in terms of resources and other capacities as well. Now, the other issues that were discussed was resource mobilization and the financial mechanism. So resource mobilization, the question is, how can we continue to accelerate and grow the resources mobilized in support of the convention? They're trying to advance the CRP, but it was mentioned that there's so much there that there may need to be some form of intercessional work, which means that once they finish this meeting, they may need to have some form of informal discussions before we actually meet at COP15 in China to move forward on that. And that's also true for the financial mechanism. Remember, the financial mechanism is the Global Environment Facility, and those discussions and the guidance that they're looking at has enough issues that these parties may need to discuss in the interim period. What part of this last thing for SBI points out that there's so much work on hand that parties, having not met face-to-face for 2 years, really are finding it a challenge. They're doing their very best working here on a Saturday in Geneva, but they've got a lot further to go. So here in Geneva, we do have a few more side events. Let me just pull up some of the side events that we've got on the go for us here. Pardon me, I didn't get this ready right away. So even on a Saturday, we'll have a few side events taking place. Today, we will have one side event that's put together by a large consortium, representatives of the IPLCs, the Secretariat, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, etc. And this is called Applying a Human Rights-Based Approach in the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. So this event will take a look at how human rights could inform and mobilize and help mainstream issues of biodiversity protection across a lot of areas. That's taking place in Salle ABC, or Room ABC here at 1:15. Second one is we have an interface dialogue on finance and biodiversity. The financial sector is now being implicated even more in the work of the convention. Finance sectors are starting to look at things like the risk that they're assuming when they take on biodiversity-related projects, etc. So this dialogue will be a way for the finance sector to engage with the CBD community and talk about some of the issues. That's taking place in Room D. There's also an event put together by the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, and they're looking at the question of what's called nature-based solutions. Nature-based solutions are ways that you can use biodiversity to address the questions of climate change, adaptation, mitigation. Now, you have to remember that under the convention process, some people refer to nature-based solutions. Other people feel that we should discuss them as ecosystem-based approaches, so that terminology is actually under discussion. But in any event, this side event is going to be looking at what are the ways to ensure that those nature-based solutions indeed protect biodiversity and produce results and don't become another sort of side way to not move forward in action. So that's in Room 14. And that's all we have for today. We've only got side events, which is thank goodness, because there's a lot of work to do. So this is the last thing you'll hear from me until Monday, and Monday we'll have probably slightly more formal press conference. So you can follow the plenary on YouTube today, and if you're not going to be joining us again, see you on Monday when there'll be a stock-taking plenary, and we'll take a look at how we're moving into the home stretch here in Geneva. So I look forward to seeing you. Have a great Saturday and Sunday. My name is David Ainsworth.